Browne. Welcome to this week's MFB News, reporting to you from what feels like the depths of autumn on the 3rd or 4th September, whatever it is. It's pouring with rain, the wind's howling. Yeah, it definitely feels like it's time to start digging out the big coats, doesn't it? Having said that, I have heard there's rumours that things are going to get nicer again, so let's keep our fingers and toes crossed. And before we really get into the content as well, can I all just congratulate all those parents who have survived the summer holidays, 6 or 8 weeks of entertaining children. It's not easy. Mine goes back to school today. So yeah, actually well done to all of you guys as well. Now, in terms of what we're going to cover you for this week, because we are here to talk about mortgages and things relating to being a landlord, we're going to do our rundown on what's been happening with swap rates, lender pricing changes. Have got a bit of news in there for you, so do tune in for that. We're going to go through a lender criteria change, which I think is quite an interesting one that I want to delve into in a bit of detail. We're going to talk about the autumn statement, or the rumours about the autumn statement. I don't want to talk about it, it makes me angry, but we're going to talk about it anyway because I think it's important that everyone is abreast of what's going on there. And then what we're going to do is have a look at landlord sort of performance, as it were, by regions. This is interesting for those of you who are maybe heavily invested in one part of the country, having a think about maybe doing some more investing. I'm wondering, where's a good place for yields? Actually, I've had a bunch of rental voids on my properties. Is this kind of endemic across the whole of the UK, or actually is this something which is more regional? So where has low yield, that kind of stuff. So really, really interesting information for those of you who are keen to know how other people are getting on with being a landlord. Okay, so let's start things off by catching up on what's been happening with swap rates. 2-year swaps 3.73. 1 week ago 3.5, and 1 year ago just over 4%. So month on month swap rates are circa 0.15% higher than they were, and actually it's very, very similar for your 5-year swaps as well. So 5 years at 3.79, 1 month ago 3.62, and 1 year ago 3.71. So actually on 5 years, both year on year and month on month, we're in a little bit of a worse position, not desperately so, but worse enough that we are seeing some lenders tweak their pricing upwards, and I'll come on to that in a moment. So what on earth is going on with swap rates? As always, there are a gazillion factors that go into this. We know that with swap rates, it's largely linked to a prediction of what's going to happen with base rate. Has there been any major changes in terms of things like inflation in the last week or so? There's been no real information announced that's going to change that. But what has happened is the rumours about the autumn statement have really got going, and the markets have responded, particularly the bond market, very badly to that. Why is this? Because the kind of perception across the world, not just in the UK, of some of the decisions that Rachel Reeves is rumoured to be making, and let's just be very clear, these are just rumours at this stage, and let's hope they stay that way. But actually, what essentially it's saying is that the view is that the UK is going to be in a weaker position for these changes. Therefore, is it seen as a weaker place to invest money, and therefore the UK will have to pay higher interest rates to attract investment money. Therefore, that pushes up bond rates. So that's what's going on there. So, in terms of the direction of travel here, it depends what happens really. If, for example, if Rachel Reeves were to come out, and this isn't going to happen, but if she were to come out and make a statement saying, oh, actually, none of these rumours are true, I can categorically deny this and this isn't going to be happening in the autumn statement, that might appease the markets. Invariably, what we know with government, particularly when we're leading up to a big event like things like the autumn statement, the rumour mill goes into overdrive, and actually things can get worse before they get better. So I think my kind of view here is essentially to say that actually for those of you who are, and there are lots of you, and understandably so, who are in need of a mortgage rate, particularly those of you who are mortgaging in sort of like anything from now to 7-8 months time in the future, and you're kind of just waiting because you're hearing in the press that base rate's going to go down loads next year and all the rest of it, which may be the case, and you're waiting for interest rates to come down. Just know that at the moment we're going to go through a period of time where I think fixed rates are going to become slightly elevated. Is that going to be a long-term thing? It's very, very hard to say. What I can tell you is that the best advice right now is to get your applications in, book your rate. You can always change it later. You're not stuck with it for the duration, but just to kind of give yourself a worst case position. Now, NatWest have made a piece of lending criteria change, which I thought just sparked an interesting thing to talk about actually. So what they've said is that the letting agent costs you declare for your customers will no longer impact the assessment for both low and high rate taxpayers. We've now built these costs into our affordability calculations. So what does this actually mean? So basically, when you would apply for a buy-to-let mortgage with NatWest, you would declare your gross rental income. You then have to state whether you were paying a letting agent for managing the property, and then when they're doing their rental calculation, they were going to work off the net figure. So after you've paid your letting agent their fees. Now, what they're saying here is essentially you don't need to declare that figure anymore. We've built it into our calculators, which is all well and good. It's an interesting one because actually most lenders don't ask you to declare whether you're using a letting agent or not. That doesn't really focus in the calculation they're using. So most lenders, when they're doing the rental calculation, they're just working off of the gross rental income that you receive. So if your rent is £1,000 a month, irrespective of the fact you might be giving a letting agent 100, 150 quid out of that, they're still going to work on £1,000 a month. Now, I suppose the question could be, well, how come they're able to do that? And I think there's two things to say in response to this point. So the first thing is that actually, when we're looking at the rental calculations, don't forget the lenders are already kind of factoring in costs by doing their 145 or 125% coverage bit. So first of all, they're kind of factoring the fact you might have ongoing costs with the property there. The second thing is that actually, while you may choose to use a letting agent to manage your property, you don't have to. So one would almost argue that this is not a committed cost. It's something that you could duck out of and let privately instead if you wanted to. So I think that's really how lenders kind of square that one with themselves. But just to kind of be very clear, when you're being asked, well, how much rental income are you achieving on your property, you're being asked to give the gross rental figure, not the net figure after cost to letting agents, and certainly not after ground rent and service charges. Okay, time to talk about autumn statement rumours. So there's lots of talk in headlines. I'm sure most of you are subscribed to at least one kind of landlord newsletter of some description or another, so you would have seen the headlines about this, if nothing else. But there are some kind of alleged proposed changes to taxation which will be impactful to landlords. So I thought we'd probably just talk about these in the vain hope that actually, if nothing, forewarned is forearmed. But if for some of you who maybe are thinking about making various tweaks to your portfolio, for example, incorporations would be the prime example of this, when you'll understand why in a second, this might kind of help G you into action. So the first thing is, and this is the real biggie, that the Chancellor is currently apparently reportedly examining proposals for applying national insurance to rental income, and this is in the hope of raising £2 billion worth of revenue per year. So the kind of maths on this, just for those of you who like to understand, is that net property income totaled £27 billion in 2022 to 23, and that was from 2.2 million people. So that's how many people have buy-to-lets in this country, 2.2 million. It's a lot of you. And this is according to national figures, incidentally. So if they were to levy a national insurance contribution of 8% onto that revenue, that would generate £2.18 billion in taxes for the government. So this is kind of where these numbers are coming from. So at the moment, apparently officials are drawing up options for tax rises in an attempt to avoid breaking the red line set by Rachel Reeves before the general elections. This is where she stood up and said that she would not raise taxes for working people. So the fact that landlords are now being kind of potentially taxed more is so insulting to landlords. I just can't quite get over it, to say that we're not working people. And even if you were to argue that buy-to-lets and rental income is a passive income, which it clearly isn't, still you have working people. And a prime example would be myself. I work, I have a day job, I pay national insurance through my income here. By taxing my buy-to-let income, I'm also paying more tax. So it would just be that essentially they've kind of broken that promise. But I think we're all expecting promises to be broken with the autumn statement. It's just the extent of how far they go with it. So in terms of the national insurance contribution, who's this going to impact? So essentially anybody receiving rental income in their personal names. So for those of you who have a limited company, so far as I can tell, this probably won't touch you guys because that's not the kind of wording that we're hearing at the moment. But for those of you who have rental income coming through in your personal name, this is going to impact you. National insurance contributions range from 2% to 8% of your income, depending on your tax status or tax code. So you may find that actually you could be paying just 2%, which, is not great, but it's better than 8%, which some people will end up with. So this is the one that's really upset landlords, and rightly so. at a time where we're feeling so incredibly squeezed with all the, many things that are going on, to then add another taxation onto there is a really bad thing. Now, the rest of the taxation that's been talked about is mainly to do with selling and purchasing property. So the first one is capital gains tax on high value primary homes. So not necessarily applicable directly as you to landlords, but to you as property owners. The rumour the government makes saying capital gains tax to include the sale of primary residences valued at over £1.5 million. So most people this isn't going to impact. But for those of you who are lucky enough to own a home which is worth over £1.5 million, just be aware that there could be a tax brought into play which would be applicable if you sold your home. They're also talking about taxing, replacing stamp duty with something called a national property tax. Now, at the moment, what they're saying is that they're going to replace stamp duty with an annual property tax, which applies to only properties over £500,000. So loads of people in the UK are immediately going, fantastic, I'm going to buy a property worth less than 500k. I'm not going to pay any stamp duty. I'm not convinced on that. I can't see the government simply giving away that taxation. Personally, I could be wrong on this point. Obviously, I suspect we will see something replace stamp duty at a lower level. But obviously the key thing is that actually there is going to be a kind of different tax. I think I've seen the 0.85% as a number banded around. Whether that's true or not, where that's come from, I'm not sure. But 0.85% was the number I've seen on properties where you're buying them over £500,000. So actually for loads of people around the country, where they're not buying properties for £500,000, you're not going to be worried about this. But for those of you who are particularly investing in, first of all, the southeast, where we know that loads of properties are worth over 500k, but also in larger properties. And by this, I particularly think of things, HMOs tend to be higher value around the country, but there are also, plenty of really expensive homes outside the southeast that could be impactful. So could be good to get the property market going, but actually not great if you are thinking of investing. Now, the next rumour is a rumoured tax on the sale of homes above £500,000. So not only would the stamp duty replacement only apply to purchases over 500k, but actually if you're selling a property over 500k, there could be another one-off tax at that point to you guys as sellers as well. So I suppose the message there is if you've got property worth over £500,000 and you're thinking about selling it, it could be a good idea to try and get that done. But I mean, the autumn statement is just a few weeks away now, so really are you going to be able to change the dial on that one? You might be a little bit late. And what happens with these kinds of taxes, as we've seen before, is that when they are introduced, they introduce them straight away. They don't run them in slowly. So actually it could be that, once this gets announced, if it gets announced, it comes into play the next day or something equally horrific as that. The last one that we're seeing talked about is changes to inheritance tax and wealth reforms. So possible changes are raising inheritance tax rates above the current 40%. So if someone dies and you're left some of their estate, at the moment the tax you might pay on that is 40%. They're talking about increasing that. And the second thing is that everyone does have a nil rate band of £325,000. Again, that is going to be lowered. So essentially you would pay tax on a greater value of item at a higher level. So one thing, and this is why I kind of mooted at the beginning about limited companies, is that we are seeing more and more landlords looking to use limited company structures as a way of kind of estate planning. So it's very hard to kind of flexibly leave properties or start handing properties over to family members or whoever it is you want to give it to, the cat's trust or something, when you own a property personally, because you can't have your son or daughter owning just like a little bit of the property. Well, you actually can, but it's quite complicated, whereas using a limited company gives you much more flexibility of ownership because of having shares basically. So if you are thinking about doing some estate planning via using a limited company, this could be a very good time to pick up the phone to your tax advisor. So there you go. Not great news, if I'm honest. I'm feeling pretty angry about the whole thing, but they are just rumours at this stage, so there's no point getting too bent out of shape. But like I said, I think at least it's worth knowing that these are things that are being mooted at least. So if there was any possibility of you being able to kind of jump in and make a change to whatever it is you're doing to help mitigate that, then that would be absolutely fantastic. We will keep you posted. Okay, let's move on to something more positive. The rental market as it currently stands. The Mortgage Works have done one of their fabulous reports, and this is their regional snapshot report, which covers Q2, so April to June 2025. So what they do is they give you a kind of summary of the whole of the UK, and then what they do is they break it down regionally. So it's quite interesting. I love these. I'm probably just a massive nerd, but anyway. So kind of to give you, I'm going to give you the overall UK numbers, and I'm going to give you it by region, by the kind of highest performers. So in terms of the people that responded to this, the first vote went out to NRLA members. So people who are responding are bona fide landlords. The respondents, average landlords had, the average portfolio size, was 6.9 properties, with at least 51% of those responding having a buy-to-let mortgage. Estimated portfolio value as an average was 1.7 million. Gross rental income per property was 10,621. The average rental yield was 6.5%. So across all of the regions, 8% of people have bought a property in the last 12 months. 22% of people have sold a property in the last 12 months. Now, I think we need to be slightly careful of this, because it could be that, and I think I'm probably clutching at straws slightly, but the 8% of people that have bought a property, we don't know if they've bought 1 or 50. Likewise, with the selling, we don't know if they've sold 1 or 50. So while we know the kind of general trend in terms of numbers of people buying and selling, what we don't know is what that actually contains. So just to kind of be slightly sceptical with these headlines. 27% as an average of landlords across the UK have experienced rent arrears. 37% have had rental voids. Now, in terms of confidence across the UK, so 37% of landlords are feeling confident about rental yields, 35% are feeling confident about their own letting business, 18% are confident in terms of the prospect of a capital gain, i.e. their property portfolio increasing in value, and 2% of you are feeling confident about the UK economy at the moment. Now, looking at more profitability across portfolios as an average, 87% of landlords are making a profit, 8% break even, and just 5% are making a loss. So in terms of the kind of, let's call it the day-to-day monetary side of running a portfolio, things are looking pretty healthy. The average number of people having rent arrears is pretty high at 27% actually, and rental voids 37%, that's definitely crept up. But actually, you know, I don't think those numbers have materially changed since last time we covered this report. So maybe things are holding a bit more steady in that regard, which is positive. So for those of you who, like me, are massively kind of curious and want to know how things are performing in different regions, here's the kind of outliers. So the average rental yield, the highest performing region in the UK is the Northwest at 7.4%. The most active landlords for buying properties are in the Northeast, with 20% of Northeast landlords buying property in the last 12 months. The most active for selling properties is the Northwest, with 34% of landlords in the Northwest having sold a property in the last 12 months. Now, rent arrears seem to be the highest in Wales and East Midlands, with 43% of landlords in both those regions having experienced rent arrears, which is nearly half. That's really high, isn't it? Void periods is the East Midlands again, 54%. The confidence in terms of rental yields, so the highest sort of level, as it were, is the East of England, apologies. The East of England, with 45% of landlords feeling confident about the prospect for rental yields going forwards. Confidence in own letting business, the Northeast and the Southwest, both landlords in those regions, 47% of those are feeling confident. Confidence over capital gains, the West Midlands, 27% of you are feeling confident about the prospect of capital gains in your region. That is one of the areas actually that's been doing quite well in terms of house prices. I'm sure there's a connection there. Confidence in the UK economy. I'm going to give you the lowest number as well as the highest. So the least confident landlords in the UK are in Wales, where 0% of landlords are feeling confident about the UK economy. Isn't that absolutely terrible? Beaten only slightly by landlords in Yorkshire and the Humber, where just 1% of you are feeling confident in the UK economy. So this is really terrible stuff. Most confident in the UK economy, it's always this region that comes out with the highest number, so Central London, 24%. In terms of profitability, so 90% of landlords are making a profit in the East Midlands. That's kind of like the most profitable area. And the largest number of landlords making a loss is Central London, which again won't come as a great surprise, with 9% of landlords making a loss there. So there you go. It's really interesting. I mean, what I find fascinating is that actually when we look at most of these numbers, it tends to be the kind of northern half of the country, so northeast, northwest, Wales, all those areas where they tend to have the highest yields, the highest number of kind of movement in terms of properties both buying and selling, but they also tend to experience the highest number of rental voids and rent arrears as well. So it's kind of definitely a bit of a north-south divide in terms of landlords' experience and activity in the private rental sector. But hopefully at best interesting, and also I hope that would be useful if any of you are thinking about particularly investing in the coming weeks and months. And that's us for this week. Hopefully when I see you next time around, the sun will be shining and rumours about the autumn statement will have kind of dampened down. And actually what they're talking about is the fact that Rachel Reeves is going to remove Section 24 and give landlords a massive pay rise for doing a great job. Maybe not. Any questions, give us a call at 345 345 6788. Have a fantastic week and I'll see you same time again next Wednesday.